Hi, coaching friends. This is September. Wanted to come to you today with a very short, very informal video about what coaches might be doing during this time when lots of programs are closed, schools are closed, teachers are home, teachers are teaching, but in a way that is different from before. And I keep getting the question from lots of different people about the role of the coach and what coaches should be doing during this time or what coaches could be doing during this time. And so I have some thoughts. This is, again, very informal. It's pretty off the cuff. Not all of these thoughts are fully formed. And so I just thought I would share what I'm thinking today. And then maybe all of you can give me some feedback and I can continue to share what other folks are thinking about as well. So I want to start by saying that I think it's important for us to go beyond just kind of being the person who provides resources or sending people a bunch of stuff or even organizing a bunch of stuff for people, and certainly go beyond asking people, how can I help? I mean, I think it's sort of like when someone is suffering in a medical crisis, asking them, what can I do to help, is probably not a super helpful question. Instead saying, hey, I could make dinner for you, or I could do the laundry for you, or I could run some errands for you. Which of those do you want me to do, is a more helpful approach in that case often. And I think it could be a more helpful approach in this case too. And so for those of you who are coaches, thinking about what are the 2 or 3 or 4 options that I could give people for ways that I could help them is probably more helpful than just saying, hey, tell me how I can help you. We also know that people's inboxes are super jammed with all kinds of resources, and it feels like everybody's on Facebook Live and everybody's on Instagram Live and everybody's on Zoom, and there are a million meetings, and I'm hearing from people that they're spending literally like 8 to 10 hours a day on Zoom meetings. And so maybe we don't want to add to that clutter either. But I think one of our big roles can be to remind people that teaching is not going to look the way that it has always looked, and learning is not going to look the way that we think it should look in schools, and that this is an opportunity for us to think about what it can look like and not just try to replicate exactly what has been happening in schools. And so I want to start by talking about how we might continue to engage in practice-based coaching during this time. It might be that we can pretty easily do action planning and reflection and feedback, and it might be harder for us to do focused observation, or we might be able to use all 3 components of the practice-based coaching cycle. First, we need to think about what the practices are. So maybe we need to step back and take some time to define a set of practices, and maybe those practices are related to family engagement. Maybe those practices are related to the activities that teachers are sending home, or the ways that teachers are interacting with children online or through apps, or maybe their practices related to self-care. I talked to someone this week who was like, I don't even know what self-care would look like for me in this time. And so maybe we could create a list of self-care practices and share those with teachers and have them do some action planning around self-care. Or maybe it's about time management. You all are hearing so much from me right now about the importance of routines and really finding a rhythm or finding a routine. And maybe that's what we could do with our teachers is figure out what the practices are that they want to implement in terms of creating their own daily routine as teachers. And then, of course, they can share some of those ideas with families as well. So once we've figured out what we're going to coach on, then we can do some action planning. And maybe some of this is really about helping teachers create a vision for themselves of what they want their teaching to look like over the next month or 2 months or 4 months, however long this ends up being. I know that many schools are really looking at not going back this year at all. And so maybe we think about between now and the end of May, or between now and the beginning of June, what does each of our teachers want for their connections with their students to look like? What do they want their connections with families to look like? What do they want their daily routines to look like? And really helping them define what teaching is for them over the next couple of months, and creating a vision can be really helpful. And once our teachers have done that, then that makes action planning pretty easy, because we can say, oh, all right, well, let's take a piece of this and implement a plan. Maybe we end up meeting with teachers every week instead of every other week, because this is a time that things are changing pretty quickly, and they're going to be learning really fast and trying things and finding that they don't work. And so maybe instead of hour-long meetings every other week, we go to like 20-minute or 30-minute meetings once a week, or even a couple of times a week. Probably not a couple of times. I'm thinking once a week is probably more than enough, considering what most of our teachers are trying to work on. And so once we've got a set of practices, or we've helped teachers figure out what their vision might be for this time that they're teaching in a totally different way, then we can start to think about what their action steps are, and, you know, writing short-term goals for that. In terms of focused observation, maybe we're not doing focused observation. Maybe it really is that we're supporting teachers and reflecting on their own practice, or we're having them share with us some evidence of implementation. So maybe it's pictures, maybe they've created some products, maybe they're working ahead for next year and creating some goals around that. Maybe we're getting some feedback from families about what's happening, and that could be a source of information that we use in terms of what might replace focused observation. Or maybe we go ahead and do focused observation. If teachers are interacting with children through online platforms or apps, there may be an option to record those interactions and have you as the coach watch those interactions and be able to provide some feedback on those interactions. Or maybe if teachers are having an online meeting, you as the coach could join that meeting and be part of the interaction, or join and mute your video, mute your audio, not be part of the interaction. That's probably a better option. And then be able to do a focused observation as if you were actually in the classroom. I do want to say that we need to be very careful when we're talking about interacting online, and certainly when we're recording online, that we need to think about FERPA, and we need to think about COPPA, and we need to make sure that, legally speaking, we're on solid ground, and that we're not violating privacy of children and families, and that we're obeying all of the rules and the laws. And I know that some programs are really thinking about what happens if we're on Zoom, or we're on, you know, Google Meetup, or whatever it is that we're using, and maybe we hear some interactions that are happening in the background that are concerning, or maybe we see something sitting on a shelf that is something that we wouldn't want to see in the households of our families. And so certainly there need to be some conversations at the program level and at the district level, or whatever the kind of governing body that you're working with, in terms of what that needs to look like for focused observation. But probably we need to be having those conversations whether we're doing focused observation or not. I think those conversations are happening in some places, and in some places I'm just hearing like, oh, teachers are posting stuff on their own private Facebook page. So I think there's a wide range in terms of what's going on with that. And so obviously, if we're going to do focused observation, we want to be following the law, and we want to be following any program or district regulations, and just being careful that we are protecting children's privacy as we figure all of this out. Reflection, I think, can happen the way that it always does. And so whether I've seen something or not, I can certainly prompt a teacher to reflect on how things are going with their practice. So that's probably the main thing that I would continue to think about, is how do we keep practice-based coaching going, even as teachers aren't in the same room with their coaches and aren't in the same room with the children that they teach. Another option for coaches might be to do some training, and certainly it's much easier to do training online than I think it is to do teaching of 3-year-olds online. And so if our teachers are figuring out how to do it online, we can too. So maybe we bring some of our trainings online, or maybe we take advantage of a lot of the trainings that are out there. And as a coach, our role can be to facilitate teachers or groups of teachers as they move through those online trainings. So this is something that I've really been thinking about related to Transition Boot Camp, which is designed to be done by teachers over a 15-day period, and thinking about how we could coach those teachers and do some check-ins with them every 2 or 3 or 4 days or even once a week to say, hey, how's it going with these activities, and what have you done so far, and what are you thinking about, and provide them some opportunity to reflect either individually or in groups on what they're learning in the training. Certainly if you're doing the e-pyramid modules, this is a great time for teachers to get those done. And again, there is a way that we can walk teachers through that. If you are interested in getting a copy of the ePyramid Leaders Guide for the pre-K modules, that is available. Just shoot me an email and I'm happy to send it to you. And that walks you through some extension questions that you can ask related to the ePyramid modules, and gives you some ideas of the homework assignments or the worksheets or other activities that teachers can be doing that you could check in on related to that. So I would say one role for coaching might be to support teachers as they're going through some online professional development, for sure. Certainly as coaches, we can be planning for next year. Let's think about what went well in the first half of this year and how we can replicate that success, how we might do things differently next year. We could really get our forms in order. We could do some professional development of our own. We could be working on an orientation, you know, planning the calendar year. So this is a good time for us to be doing that as well. Back to the idea of providing practice-based coaching, I'm also thinking that maybe there's a role for us in supporting teachers in doing some practice-based coaching with the families of their children. So maybe this looks like sending home some activities like many teachers have been doing, and then following up with parents and saying, you know, out of that list of 20 activities that we sent, which one are you going to do? And can you record yourself doing that with your child? And maybe we do one of those a week or one every couple of weeks with each family, where we're actually asking them to really hone in on one of the things that we're sending home with them, and record it so we can do some observation and some reflection and feedback with parents about their implementation of what's being sent home. We could do something similar with IEP goals, right? So here are your child's IEP goals. Here are the ways that we were working on those goals in the classroom, and maybe pick one of those strategies to try at home, and then let's think about a time of day that you could try that, right? So we can work through the action planning process with parents in the same way that we would with teachers. I'm also thinking that we could support parents in figuring out routines, and do some action planning around routines. Maybe we start with a bedtime routine, or we start with some routine that makes mealtime a little more manageable, or just having the conversation with families about what's the hardest time of your day. Oh, it's when both of you are on conference calls and you've got a child who's like jumping up and down on the video screen. So let's figure out a solution for that time. Certainly, if we're providing some materials for parents around any topic, so I'm thinking about the Backpack Connection series, and if I were a teacher, I might be considering some of those Backpack Connection handouts to share with families. And if that's the case, each of those outlines some ideas to try at home. And so then I might say to a parent, why don't you pick one of these ideas and let's talk about what that might look like in your house over the next week, and then we'll check back in next week. So doing some experimenting with practice-based coaching with families, I think could be really interesting at this time. So those are kind of the big ideas that I have. Try to keep coaching, support other kinds of professional development. Think about your own professional development and how you could engage in that over this time. Do some planning for next year, and think about practice-based coaching with families. I think all of those could be really good uses of a coach's time. So interested to hear what the rest of you are doing. I have to give a shout out to the folks who were on the live chat on Slack this week who really inspired this video, and I appreciate all of the ideas and inspiration and conversation that you all brought. And I want to say thanks to all of the folks who have been sending me emails about what they've been doing and questions that they have. And so I hope this video was helpful. Please feel free to reach out if you have other ideas or other questions, and I may continue to do some short videos like this over the time that we're in quarantine. We'll see how it goes. Hope this was helpful, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.